Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
That's it. That's all. The 45th general election is in the books. I'm David Smith. Thank you for joining us on this special edition of The Big Story, breaking down the results of an historic election race. And it was a wild ride, wasn't it? From the start, a short 36-day campaign, a new, untested Liberal leader, a confident and well-financed Conservative Party, all with the backdrop of the specter of Donald Trump's threats to Canada's economy and to our national sovereignty. It has been nothing if not a remarkable few months in Canadian politics. At one point, not so long ago, it looked like a Conservative majority election win might be inevitable. The country had soured so much on Justin Trudeau, and Canadians overwhelmingly told pollsters they would be voting for a Conservative government led by Pierre Poilievre in the next election. But then Trudeau resigned, and in came Mark Carney, and the Conservative Party's huge lead in the polls seemed to evaporate almost overnight. And by the time the campaign actually officially started, the two parties were neck and neck. By the end of the second week, the Liberal Party was polling comfortably in majority government territory, and nothing the Poilievre campaign did or said seemed to matter. Nothing seemed to move the numbers. And that's when the infighting began in the Conservative camp. While Poilievre continued to hammer the Liberal government record, the Liberal campaign focused around the singular issue of Trump's threats to Canada. Influential Conservative voices called it campaign malpractice, that the Conservatives had lost their massive lead in the polls. Voices, both inside and outside the party, called for Poilievre to throw out his playbook and pivot. But Poilievre dug in, for better or for worse. Still, the Liberals didn't run away with the race as some people might have thought after the first couple of weeks. In fact, just past the midway point, after the leaders' debate in Montreal, the race began to tighten. The Liberal lead softened just enough to keep things interesting. And as support for the NDP collapsed, it became a two-way race, with the progressive vote coalescing around the Liberals strategically, with the Conservatives nipping at their heels, 3, 4, 5 points behind. And then over the weekend, over the final weekend of the campaign, some of the final polls had the Liberals up on the Conservatives by only a point or two, within the margin of error. In the end, it didn't take long. It was just after 10:15 p.m. Eastern Time when all the major news networks called the election for the Liberals. Just 45 minutes after the polls closed in central Canada, and it was all over. The only question at that time was whether the Liberals would secure a majority. And it wasn't until the early morning hours that it became clear Mark Carney pulled off the upset, but the Liberals will not form a majority government. It will be another minority for the Liberals and for Mark Carney. At the time of recording this show, the Liberals are poised to take 167 seats, the Conservatives 145, the Bloc 23, the Greens 1, and the NDP 7. And because they failed to win a majority, the Liberals will have to work with other parties to implement their agenda. And they may even need to look to the Conservatives for support passing legislation, depending on what the final seat count is. We'll have to wait for the final seat count to be confirmed fully to understand what the next parliament will look like. It was close. That is a major storyline following this election. It was close in the end. As the early results began rolling in from Atlantic Canada, things started out looking pretty good for the Conservatives. Strategists had warned to watch for a Liberal sweep in the Atlantic provinces, but it did not materialize. The Conservatives flipped 2 seats in Newfoundland, held on to another, but then a different story was told on Prince Edward Island, where the Liberals did sweep all 4 seats. In New Brunswick, the Liberals held on to 6 out of 10. Longtime Liberal cabinet minister Dominic LeBlanc held on to his seat. in his 9th straight election win. The race in Nova Scotia was even worse for the Conservatives, losing 10 of 11 races. And Sean Fraser, another former Trudeau cabinet minister, was re-elected in Central Nova. In Quebec, the story is all about the Bloc. The Bloc Québécois were well down in the polls midway through the campaign, and that opened up the possibility of a Liberal majority built on seats picked up in La Belle Province. But the Sovereigntist Party eventually held on to just enough ridings to play spoiler, although they will return to Ottawa with fewer seats than they had before. Battleground Ontario. The vote-rich province, Canada's largest, often determines the outcome of elections. And just like the outcome of this election, the battle in Ontario was closely fought. And the big story there is that it was a two-way race between the Liberals and the Conservatives. At the time of recording, the NDP have failed to pick up even a single seat in Ontario. This is a spectacular loss for the New Democrats, a shocking outcome with huge implications for the balance of power in the House of Commons and the overall dynamics of federal politics in this country. And the NDP struggles didn't stop in Ontario. They lost key seats in the prairies as well, shut out in Saskatchewan, and NDP incumbents were defeated in urban Winnipeg as well as in central Edmonton. It was nearly a Conservative Party sweep in Alberta. The Liberals did win a single seat in Calgary, and the NDP held on to one of the two that they had in Edmonton. And then there was BC. In beautiful British Columbia, the NDP's fortunes turned for the worse. It was about 12:40 a.m. Eastern Time when Jagmeet Singh took to the stage at NDP party headquarters in his riding of Burnaby.
Obviously, I know this night is a disappointing night for New Democrats. We had really good candidates that lost tonight. I know how hard you worked. I spent time with you. You're amazing. I'm so sorry you're not going to be able to represent your communities. I know you're going to continue to fight for them. I know on how many doors you knocked, how many family dinners you missed, how many nights your kids went to bed without you there to tuck them in. I know it was a tough sacrifice, and I just want to thank you. I've worked really hard to be worthy of this trust, to live up to the legacy of our movement. Hold on a sec here, guys. Thank you. One more sec. Tonight, I've been informed our party leader that I'll be stepping down as party leader as soon as an interim leader can be appointed. Now, I could not have done this incredible job without, here's a point, give me a second to break down a bit. I couldn't have done it without the incredible support of my wife. Could get in?
Canada's New Democrats have lost official party status, and they have lost their leader. After 3 election campaigns, Jagmeet Singh will step down. With the NDP securing just 7 seats, they have lost well over half of what they held heading into this election. When Parliament was dissolved, they held 25 ridings. Then it was Pierre Poilievre's turn. The Conservative Party leader took to the stage at his campaign headquarters in Ottawa just before 1 a.m. local time.
Canadians have opted for a razor-thin minority government, a virtual tie in the vote count. So I would like to congratulate Prime Minister Carney on leading this minority government. We'll have plenty of opportunity to debate and disagree, but tonight we come together as Canadians. We will do our job. Yes, we will do our job to hold the government to account. But first, we congratulate people from all political backgrounds on participating in the democratic process. And as I said, while we will do our constitutional duty of holding government to account and proposing better alternatives, we will always put Canada first as we stare down tariffs and other irresponsible threats from President Trump. Conservatives will work with the Prime Minister and all parties with the common goal of defending Canada's interests and getting a new trade deal that puts these tariffs behind us while protecting our sovereignty and the Canadian people.
A celebratory tone from the Conservative Party leader, but Pierre Poilievre's election story is not over. At the time of recording this show in the early morning hours, they are still counting the votes in Poilievre's own riding, Carleton. And he is losing to the Liberal candidate, Bruce Fanjoy. If Poilievre loses his own riding, there are serious questions about whether he can remain on as party leader. We will not know the final outcome until sometime on Tuesday. Keep an eye on that. And finally, a jovial Mark Carney took the stage at Liberal campaign headquarters in Ottawa, and he addressed Liberals and Canadians in his first election victory speech.
So, as we come here after this most consequential election, let's put an end to the division and anger of the past. We are all Canadian, and my government will work for and with everyone. I began with humility, but Canadians are ambitious. And now, more than ever, it is a time for ambition. It is a time to be bold, to meet this crisis with overwhelming positive force of a united Canada. Because we are going to build, baby, build.
With that, Mark Carney is your Prime Minister designate, and the Liberal Party wins a fourth consecutive federal election. In the end, to understand the outcome of this election, you need to understand what people were voting for. In the politics business, they call that the ballot question. What do Canadians want from the new government? This election was a tale of two ballot questions: change versus stability. Poilievre and the Conservatives positioned themselves as the party of change. After 9 years, the lost Liberal decade, as they called it. For millions of Canadians, this election was about change, a new direction, a new leader for a new government, ready to tackle Canada's domestic challenges. But for millions of others, this election was about stability, continuity in the face of a foreign threat. In Mark Carney, voters found the kind of stability they were now looking for in response to the chaos coming from south of the border. Here was this guy, a central banker, a business executive, new to politics, but not new to the world of high-stakes negotiation. Boring, perhaps, a stark contrast with the firebrand of Poilievre. Not as polished in the political arena, but with obvious intelligence, a dry wit, and just the right hint of charisma. Mark Carney's resume preceded him, built up by pundits and the media, and he entered the ring at exactly the right time. Within weeks, the Conservatives' massive lead in the polls had disintegrated, as Canadians were presented with a credible alternative. Mark Carney appeared as if from nowhere, perfectly tailored to meet the moment that Canada was facing. An antidote to this latest in the series of unprecedented times Canadians have been living through since 2020. Not only were Carney's credentials a perfect match for the task at hand, but his style, his personality, was also a salve to the irritation that many voters felt towards Pierre Poilievre. As popular as Poilievre is, for some voters, he's brash, arrogant, and confrontational, whereas Carney seems cool, calm, and collected. A serious person, promising serious leadership for serious times. And while there was still a strong desire for change in this election, and despite all of the anger and the disappointment that Canadians felt towards the Liberal Party and former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the addition of Mark Carney had given people a reason to feel good about voting for the Liberals again. Instead of holding their noses and voting for the Conservatives, more so out of disdain for Justin Trudeau than any affection for Pierre Poilievre, millions of voters across key demographics felt they could once again hold their heads high and vote for the Liberals to give Mark Carney the chance to be the leader he was promising to be. And while Pierre Poilievre argued that changing the man at the top did not absolve the Liberal Party of its record after 9 years in government, and though there will be many Conservative supporters left with a sour taste in their mouths at the prospect of another Liberal government, in the end, enough Canadians were ultimately willing to look beyond past failings and give the Liberals another chance, allowing Mark Carney to pull off one of the greatest political upsets in our nation's history. The campaign is over, and now the real work begins. We expect Mark Carney will meet with President Trump in the coming days or weeks, and the two leaders will begin trade negotiations in earnest. The stakes have never been higher. All we can do is wait and watch to see what happens next. I'm David Smith. For all of us here at The Big Story, thank you for listening to our special post-election show and for tuning in all throughout the campaign. As always, we love to hear your feedback. You can email us hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or wherever you get your podcasts. Please remember to rate, review, follow, and share.